Okay, good afternoon, colleagues. Good afternoon, and welcome to our special SPPC largely for a public participation meeting for the 2017 portion, 2018 portion of our multi-year budget. If you take a look at the agenda, you'll see that the first scheduled item is that 4 p.m. public participation meeting. Everything else, I think, on the report could be described as inside baseball, and what I'd like to do is look right to go right to that item number 4 and respect the members of the public who have attended today and who are here to speak. And so I think what I'll do is exactly that after looking for any disclosures of pecuniary interest. There are none, and so if we could have a motion then to open the public participation meeting. Up on screen. Wait for it. There it is. That's been moved by Councillor Turner and seconded by Councillor Cassidy. Any discussion? Councillor Morgan.
I don't have to stand up. I just have a point. I know the committee agendas came out today for what will be the budget debate. And as the public engages in their, the public participation portion of this meeting, there is an item on that agenda that is public that is related to some impacts on the tax levy related to the ability to potentially use assessment growth. There's a staff recommendation to actually use some excess from assessment growth that would change the amount that the tax rate would be. Obviously, we have to debate and decide that, but I wonder if that's important context for at least the public to know before they weigh in on the amount. And I don't know if the treasurer can make at least a brief comment, knowing that it is a report with a staff recommendation and not something that has been debated or decided by council yet.
Ms. Barbon, you have good news for us, and as treasurer, I think it would be great if you could share that with us and with those watching from home. And Councillor Morgan's exactly right. We'll debate this a little bit later, not at this meeting. We'll debate it at a subsequent meeting, but I think it would be good context for all of us to know that there's some good news on the assessment growth horizon.
Thank you, and through the chair. So, and just to put that in context, so obviously when we presented the budget, council asked us to go back and take a look at options to potentially reduce the tax levy. So one of the options that we have included within our report is we were able to get a final number for our assessment growth. So typically we don't actually get that number until December, but we worked with MPAC and we were able to get that information a little earlier than usual. So that certainly is something that we wanted to include as a possible option, notwithstanding that council has a policy to use assessment growth for different applications. So based on that, the number that we have come in is approximately 1.26%, which is a little bit higher than what we have identified as our business cases that we have written to support the growth needs of the city. So we are recommending in that report that that is certainly, notwithstanding council's policy for on assessment growth, that it would be prudent given the one-time challenges and particularly the challenges outside of council's control impacting the City of London's multi-year budget, that it would be prudent for council to consider using that to apply against the tax rate. And given that it is in excess of what our needs are, we feel that that's wise to recommend that.
Well, thank you for getting that information to us at this early date. I can recall some treasurers taking as long as January or February to get that assessment growth information. Councillor Morgan has the floor.
Yes, I appreciate that. And I know it's a little unorthodox to raise something on the agenda at a future meeting, but I thought, given that the tax rate is often something that the public comments in the public participation portion, I thought it was important to draw attention. And I apologize for not like grabbing you before the meeting to say I was going to ask you this question, but I grabbed the report. So what it does say is there's about $1.5 million of assessment growth revenue, including the carry forwards beyond what the business cases are doing, which if applied as is the staff recommendation but not debated or approved by council would lower the 2018 anticipated or tabled increase from 3.3 to 3.0. And you know, the public may want to weigh in on that or not, but probably important context for them to have that it is an item we will debate as a council, and I just wanted to raise it. I appreciate my colleagues allowing me to do so today.
Okay, we've got a motion. It's been moved by Councillor Turner, seconded by Councillor Cassidy to open the public participation meeting. And if there are no additional speakers, I will call the question. And we're voting, and Councillor Van Holst is voting manually, yay.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 12-0.
Ms. Barbone, we didn't cover this during our pre-meeting, but did you have any presentation that you wanted to provide before we hear from the public?
No, we did not at
Okay,
this time.
great. Thank you. So welcome, everyone. I can see a number of people in the gallery. What I'd like to do is just start on, well, your right-hand side and work our way across the gallery and invite speakers to come forward. You have 5 minutes to let this committee of council know your thoughts on the budget moving forward. I'd ask that if you're comfortable stating your name and providing your address, that you do so. If you're not comfortable doing that in this public forum, then one of our staff members can come up and speak with you about that and get that information for the record. And also, if you have anything in writing, if you could please just indicate that, and a staff member will come up and retrieve that. It just makes the note-taking and getting the public record exactly right a little bit easier. So with that, I'll just invite anyone on this side of the gallery to come forward to the microphone and let us know your thoughts.
Hello, Mayor and Councillors. Thank you for letting me address you today. My name is Vicki Van Linden, and I live at 431 Ridgewood Crescent. I do have a paper copy of my delegation today. I'm asking that you consider a very modest possible increase in budgeting for the contracted position of our city veterinarian. Now, currently, the annual contract for veterinary services is approximately $107,000 for her work within the LACC facility and the surgical suite. I'm asking that you allow for funding to provide for an expansion of the role of the city vet. She can better serve our community by participating in policy and programming decisions along with the rest of our staff regarding all aspects of animal welfare and in community outreach. She's the only city employee, though a contract worker, who has years of education and experience in animal services, and she's professionally trained in the health and safety of animals. In Toronto, where the city provides animal services directly, and several veterinarians are employed, some of these veterinarians are highly visible within the community, and they provide education and outreach. They are sometimes instigators in programming, and they're available to citizens and council for discussions on policy. By taking advantage of their qualifications, Toronto is widely seen as a leader in effective animal services. The veterinarian's visibility provides a sense of confidence in the city service, and it contributes to citizen satisfaction. If we're going to make the best use of city funding that's already contracted, it makes sense that we make as much use as possible of the one and only person paid by the city who's actually trained and prepared for a career in animal welfare. So I can discuss further how the city vet can help provide additional oversight of programs and help with programming and policies. But for now, I hope that you'll agree that it's a waste of her education and experience not to involve her more fully in decision-making.
Okay, thank you. Looking for other speakers, please. Derek. Welcome.
Thank you. My name is Derek McBurney. I live at number 466 South Street in wonderful Soho, and our wonderful counselor that we have there. I would like to see an increase in the budget for property standard inspectors. I mean, right now in this city, we got too many people living with slumlords who are out-of-town landlords again. And people are living in horror stories, and you need more inspectors to be able to get out and kind of help these people out. And the other thing that's not in the budget at all I'd like to see is improvements for up here, for the public. I mean, you people deserve them down there. I think the public deserves an excellent chance to be able to sit here. And as many of you know, it's not comfortable to sit up here by any stretch of the imagination, and I'd like to see some money in the budget for the other. And I'm not sure who it was, but one of the counselors put forward putting some money that was saved into offsetting the living wage, the $15 an hour wage. And I just want to say, I think that's a great idea. If anybody has any questions they want to ask, I'll be glad to answer them.
Thank you very much. Other speakers from this side? Moving over to the other side of the gallery, anyone here to address the committee? And down on the main floor, is there anyone that would like to speak? Okay. Good afternoon.
Hi, I'm Nina McCutcheon from 202 McNay Street in London, Ontario, up by Highbury. I don't really have much to say. I just wanted to introduce myself and that I started a business here in London, Ontario, called Take It to the Streets Canada. I've been working alongside everyone to help with some changes in London, Ontario. And I just wanted to introduce that. It's a licensed business now through Service Ontario. And I'm hoping that I can work with everybody here at City Hall and throughout the city in order to conduct proper changes in our city in a better way so that we can all work together and maintain better ways for poverty and other things. So I just thought I'd introduce myself.
Thank you, and thank you for attending the meeting today. I'll ask another couple of times, as is customary here, if there are any other speakers. I'll ask one more time if there are any speakers, and there are none. So, colleagues, I'll look for a motion to close the public participation meeting. Councillor Turner.
Thank you, Your Worship. I was wondering if maybe we could recess this portion of the meeting. We've got some business to attend to for this part. There may be people that that might access the meeting later on in the day.
Sure. Why don't we do that? We can just put this this on hold, work our way through the agenda. I'll remind people as they come in that we'll be holding the second part of the public participation meeting, if you will, today. Make sure they have an opportunity to address council. Okay. So, we'll get a motion up that we'll call for recess of the PPM that will then allow us to move our way through the remainder of the agenda. That's been moved by Councillor Turner, seconded by Councillor Armstrong. Any discussion? Let's call the question. We're voting. Okay, let's circle back then to the consent items. Consent item 2 and 3. Colleagues, would you like to pull either of those? Okay, well, let's, if you just have comments, maybe we can deal with them together in a motion, but I'll look for speakers. Okay, so, Councillor Helmer?
We're dealing with 2 and 3. 3 is the strategic plan semi-annual progress report. Yeah. So on the strategic plan progress report, I'm really glad to see that we've caught up somewhat over time since the May report to now in terms of closing the number of milestones that are caution or below plan. You know, it's good to see it going in that direction versus the other way. And I think when we're reporting on essentially the timeliness and how well we're adhering to the original timelines, I think the tendency is for things to keep getting further and further below plan rather than the other way. And I was really glad to see that that's the direction we're going in. Also, that really in the grand scheme of things, a very small number of things are caution or below plan. It's a really tiny percentage of, you know, over 1,000 milestones across all the different components in the strategic plan. So I didn't want to let it pass without saying that, frankly, it's a very good news report. We're really on track on a lot of these key pieces. It takes me quite a while to go through this report. I have to tell you, it's quite a lot to digest every time, despite the fact that we've now had several of them, to kind of find the specific issues that maybe are lagging a bit, make sure I get updated on what's happening with those, And I just wanted to say, I think that the process is working pretty well, having this report come forward. And I know, and I would expect our staff know that I'll be following up on the individual committee level about the specific things that are caution or below plan, so.
Councillor Park.
Thank you. I just wanted to really commend staff. As we all know, we're all guilty of putting a lot of council member submissions and kind of increasing the workload, and to see this amount of success on this strategic plan at that point, despite the creeping workload, I'm really impressed, and I think that every member of staff from frontline to management should be really proud of the work achieved. Thank you.
Councillor Hopkins.
Thank you, and I want to thank staff for this update. I really enjoyed reading it and really appreciate the update to our strategic plan. Do have a couple questions and a comment. My first question, when I look at the areas of focus, I notice that in most of the areas we've completed about half, and and we're on target for the other half. So my question is, since we're getting closer to 2019, just wondering if staff can comment on reaching those targets in the next year and a bit. Any concerns that they may have, or to make it happen?
I'll start and then I'll throw it over to Ms. Livingston if she has any other pearls of wisdom on this, but there's always concern, and I think, you know, there's other competing items that crop up from time to time. But what's held the bulk of the ones back that we've got right now would be additional community consultation and engagement, and that can take time or can send us around in terms of further looking at items. Waiting for information, and right now we are waiting for information on some of these things. There's no telling when that will come, although we are pushing to get the information, but again, we're subject to other outside forces. Approvals for funding opportunities from other levels of government. Again, RT would be a perfect example of that, where we're waiting on that information. And then there's occasionally scope changes where we, as a result of maybe public input, require additional research and analysis on items. So depending on how much of that goes on and how many other things get added, we hope that we will be able to hit the targets, and we're going to work very hard to do that. But some of those items may knock us off, but we'll keep you monitored and updated on it.
Councillor Squire. You have the floor, Councillor Hopkins.
Thank you. Just another question. I could see, reading the report, that we are waiting for a number of things, and one of the interesting items that I'm looking forward to receiving, I guess, is the feedback on our multi-year budget survey that I know has gone out to the stakeholders, and I was just wondering if the public is part of that survey or not.
Through the chair, so that initial survey that went out was very limited to staff and to council. So we will be looking at how to broaden that process in the new year to try and do it in short order after we complete this process, so that it's fresh in people's minds as we move forward. So we're certainly looking at options on how broad to go to be able to get it done in time, so that we have plenty of feedback to implement a new policy if we're going to make any changes for the 2020 update.
Thank you. And I just want to have just make a comment to reading all the work that goes on here. It's amazing how much work staff and the community do with this strategic plan. And one of the things I notice, there's a number of strategies, and I think it's really important that we receive these strategies, given the amount of work that's being put into it by staff and the community, and that it is important that we have the process unfold as we look at these strategies and implement them. So again, I just want to thank staff for all the work.
Councillor Squire.
Mr. Chair, through you, I just, in one of the issues that's extremely important to Londoners, and I hear about all the time, is economic development, what we're doing, and I must confess that it's something that I haven't heard about for quite a while. And I noticed in the report, one of the things that is in to be completed as a milestone is explore new partnership opportunities with municipally funded economic development and community development organizations. But the milestone date is not until the end of December 2019. And I know, at least to my recollection, it's been some time since we've heard from the London Economic Development Corporation. They often come before, or they come before us sort of on a yearly basis, on what are we doing in the area? Because a day doesn't go by where people ask me, well, what does the LEDC do and what is it doing? What are you doing as a councillor? What are you doing as a city? So I wonder if there's any plan or there's any opportunity to come forward to this council before the end of its term and talk to us in conjunction with these other groups about where you are going and how it's going. I realize the completion date may be during the next term of council, but certainly there is an important date, I think the end of October next year, and I think people will be asking us, what have you done in the economic development area? What has LEDC done in the economic development area, and what can we look forward to? So I'm hoping that we will find an opportunity to have that on our agenda at some time. Perhaps you could let me know if that is possible.
Yes, through the chair, as council knows, we've got the economic roadmap that we have been actually looking at. There is a report that will be coming forward to council on that, updating council on that. We've also had some discussions with all the partners there about where do we go from here? How's it going to look in the future? So certainly there'll be opportunity for us to come back before next October and update council on that process and where we're going. Also, as the councillor indicated, LEDC and the other partners do and are required, I believe, to come before council and talk about their plans. But hopefully the steps we're taking will be to a more coordinated approach that will help move us forward. We're basically looking at Economic Roadmap 2.0, if you want to kind of look at it, step it up a notch.
And Councillor, to give you a specific time frame, we're working on having the LEDC here in early 2018.
So I guess what I'm looking for is, I'm not sure what, from your answer, what's coming back. I was hoping there would be something comprehensive on that particular issue of all of the partners. How are all of the partners working together? Whether that's the economic roadmap, if you think that's sufficient, or something else, just to let us know what is happening in that area in terms of things we fund and things we encourage for economic development. So is it going to be a more broad discussion or a broader document? Is that what Economic Roadmap 2.0 is?
That's exactly what I'm thinking, is a more comprehensive approach, bringing it all together so you know where you're going from an economic perspective. We need to really start targeting those areas that we're good at. We need to start looking at marketing campaigns and all that kind of thing. LEDC does an awful lot with respect to attracting industry here, and we need to recognize that, but there are other areas that we also need to look at. We've got the whole social enterprise piece that needs to come into it. Those are all members of the current economic roadmap, and now we've had a discussion with them all and said, okay, well, where do we need to go to step this up a notch? And so it would be a more comprehensive report.
I have another question, but before I ask that, you're sort of thinking exactly as I am, Mr. Hayward. I think you should be worried about that probably going forward, but I think that's exactly what I would like to see is a comprehensive look at what we're doing. And it's nothing to say we're not doing the right job or the wrong job. It's just let's have a look at it so that I think I'm better armed as a councillor to talk to people in the public. The second thing I wanted to address, and it's more of a statement than a question, and it's to go to the matter of looking at our subsidizing different groups in transit. And I feel that I would be really remiss if I didn't commend Ms. Livingston, Ms. Smith, Ms. Carter, and the other people who work with them about the huge amount of work they've done in this area. It started with the under 12 bus pass. It started with the creative work they did with the low-income bus pass, which has created a whole other area of work in terms of dealing with seniors who no longer have a reduced rate, and how do we deal with that? And I can tell you, I've been passing a huge number of questions directly on to city staff to deal with those, and some people are still getting used to it, but people are getting used to it. And of course, in the budget process, we're going to see something about a youth bus pass, and again, we haven't decided anything, but again, I know a huge amount of work has gone into that. The great thing about this is I think it incorporates itself into the other things we're doing. It's going to tell us before BRT shows up who is using transit. Will they use transit more if we charge them less? Do they want passes? I think these are all useful things to know, and I think staff has done a great job in helping set that table. The other thing is they're pilot projects, so we have the dexterity in the future to move to different models. But I think, you know, there's a million ways, I suppose, to try to increase, a million ideas of how to try increase ridership, and I think this is a step in the right direction, but staff has done a fantastic job.
Deputy Mayor Huber.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a couple points, and I want to start off by saying, I've got about 5 actually. I got to start off by saying one of the things that happens when you do a strategic plan is that often you lose sight of all the work that's going on. And I think Councillor Hopkins was alluding to that as well. So when you plan your work and then you work your plan, often you lose those opportunities that, hey, we're doing something new. No, it's because we did really good work a couple of years ago, and staff have been doing good work ever since. We lose that sight of all the good things that are happening. So it's a great report with a lot of good things. I do have a couple of questions. One surprised me a little bit. It's on page 72, and I've now moved on the on-screen thing, and it deals with engineering. Ms. Scheer, through you, Mr. Chair. The Western Road, Sarnia Road detailed design looks like it's delayed 2 years, and I thought we were expecting it in 2017, and it looks like it's now delayed to 2019, so we won't see anything there until 2000 and whatever. So I'm not sure I see the connection with the BRT, because that, we've already established the route, so I'm not sure how that meshes. So that's my first question.
Thank you, and through the chair. The establishment of the BRT route through campus, or potentially non-establishment when this was being worked on in the past, would have potentially seen a need for that intersection to change or reflect that future use. We have those routes established now. That work can resume, but it will take some time to complete given our resources internally. So it's a matter of playing a bit of catch up now that we have the routes established.
So 2 years of catch up?
Through the chair, it's probably about a year's process to go through the design and approvals phase. So it probably puts us behind about 18 months to 2 years, yes.
So we hadn't really started the detailed design. We kind of put the whole thing on the shelf. Is that right? Is that what you're saying? Because of the BRT discussion?
Through the chair, yes. The whole thing was put on pause at that time.
The other thing also into the weird world where the finances connect with the engineering is I noticed on a number of things, and I certainly have seen them in my ward, where projects have had to been put off because tenders were coming in way over what the budget allocation was for them. Are we seeing a general trend in that respect? And are we undertaking to, is there anything we can undertake strategically to deal with that?
Through the chair, we've seen tenders come in all over the map a bit this year. We've had some that have come in low, many on budget, and a few that have been high. We do work with procurement, with purchasing at the end of the year to review our tender prices. Certainly when we see a large amount of work go out through programs like Clean Water Wastewater or the PTIF funding, where lots of municipalities are competing for resources, that is a risk. So we will look at this towards as the year wraps up and make sure that we're well positioned for next year. Part of that is really making sure we're out early with our tenders as well. The sooner we can get out in 2018 for our 2018 work, the better.
Well, I know one of the projects I came in 30% over budget and basically got fully deferred for a year in spite of having promised residents that in the short term. So I want to know, not specifically to that, if there was a more generalized trend that could impact on some of the outcomes of some of those things. So thank you for the answer on that. The final area that I'm concerned about, because and maybe it's the language here, is, and it's to the economic development argument of Councillor Squire, is the London Medical Network's strategic plan. And we use the word, and I think this is a word that's a little too mushy for me. It's a little too foggy. Support the work of. And yet, I don't know, this medical network that we put money into a number of years ago, last term of council, to be honest, has not, I don't see anything happening. And I'm hearing from my contacts in the sector that they're not seeing a whole lot happening there either. And they're not sure how we're really leading in terms of the commercialization. So will that be part of the response coming back that you spoke to, Mr. Hayward? Or is there something else? Because both of these have, while they've got a milestone that's the end of 2019, and we say we're on track, but I'm not sure what that means because, you know, support is a very broad and nebulous term.
Yes, through the chair, I would say that's not necessarily part of the economic development piece that we were talking about, although I could loop it in there. There would be a more specific report that would come back. As you know, or maybe you don't, the London Medical Network actually has made some investments. There's been an investment in a company called Renishaw, and then there's been another one that they're working on, which is called a burst funding for commercialization as well. The major piece that we've got with the medical network is just trying to still corral everybody together and keep us moving forward. So it's really one of space and who's doing it. And so I think we've got to seriously look about who's going to be doing the major part of the work in the future. So, and that's probably going to be the subject of the next Board of Directors meeting.
I think it would be really helpful for us to know where our investments are going, how many jobs it's creating, and what the trajectory is based upon the prospectus that was given to council, the previous council, the 2010-2014, because this really came forward as a bright and shining light with our multiple hospitals with Robarts and Stiller and all of that, as well as, you know, Tech Alliance. So that would be something that I would want to look for, because I'm just really not sure what we mean by support. And finally, Mr. Mayor, one final question is, as we move into 2018, the final year of this council, and I know the new council will be looking at a new strategic plan. It might be helpful at some point to have a report back on the process and how has the process gone. We have a monster of a report, lots of good stuff happening, but what advice, before we get into a new council, before we get into anything beyond that, and I would think probably by the end of Q2 of 2018, by the time we hit the summer, you know, what have we learned from this process? What have been the you know, the good points, and then how will that inform the strategic planning process for the council of 2018 to 22? So I'll just leave that as a comment. I think that would be a valuable resource for that new council.
Any other speakers? Councillor Van Holst.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And like the other speakers, I'll say thank you to staff for what's a report that's a huge amount of work. I took some notes on some of the things that were delayed and had questions, and I don't really think they're significant enough to bring them up in front of, you know, take the committee's time with them. They're just small things I could ask later. But I do have one question, just kind of bouncing off what the Deputy Mayor was speaking about. We came into this strategic planning process where staff gave us essentially a tremendous list of to-dos, and that list is being dispatched very, very quickly now. So my question to staff is that going to be different next time, for the next time we or other council members are here? Are you piling up another list of to-dos, or are we gonna have to use some creativity to figure out what to do next?
Through the chair, the questions that you're raising at this point in time, the Strat Plan Backbone team is actually meeting tomorrow to start thinking about what we've learned through this process and what the next Strat Plan process might look like. But what I would say to the direct question is a number of the items that are in this plan carry forward. They set the stage for the next set of activity. So I wouldn't anticipate that future council's strategic plan would start from a blank slate. It would start from this place and build, but we will have a more detailed suggestion of what that next process might look like in the coming months. We're just beginning to start thinking it through, looking back at what we've learned and how we supported the development of the last plan.
Okay, well, thank you very much. That it was a fine answer, and I think it's going to be interesting and gratifying to be able to build on such a great body of work.
Any other speakers? Okay, I'll just say briefly from the chair that today is a moment of reflection for me as well. And as I was going through this over the weekend, I was thinking back to, late 2014 and just the incredible amount of work that was occurring between both council and staff. And that work was led on the staff side by Lynn Livingston. And we made a commitment to come up with a very specific strategic plan, one that was defined with more detail than I think this city has ever seen before, and most municipalities across Ontario haven't contemplated. And we made a commitment to deliver it within 100 days. Now, staff came back and delivered it in, I think it was 87, Ms. Livingston? So maybe we can look for 65 or 50 next term. That was an incredible amount of work. And the next step was to link the strategic plan with the multi-year budget that we're talking about here today as well. And it's really amazing to see the convergence of those two impressive pieces of work that other municipalities aren't doing and the follow-through. I think the most important thing about being so specific in our strategic plan was that we could measure our success. We could measure whether we were on target or not. And my takeaway today certainly is that we're on target. And that's commendable. We came up with a plan that was based on the hopes and the dreams and the aspirations of our community. We heard about those hopes, dreams, and aspirations for months and months and months when we were going door to door, and we delivered that to you as a staff and developed this document together. And so my comment really today is well done. Thank you for this impressive amount of work over the past 3 years, and I'm looking forward to seeing this implementation moving forward even further. There's one number that I think we should highlight, and really when you boil it right down to its simplest form, when we think about London and when we think about our community and when we ask ourselves, what is the work that we're doing? What does that mean to a Londoner? How does that affect a Londoner's life? We have a 95% satisfaction with quality of life here in London. And, I think, Mr. Hayward, to you and to your team, that's in large part because of the work that you do and the entire staff does every single day. So thank you very much. With that, I will call the question right after Councillor Van Holst jumps in with the last word.
Yeah, thank you very much. And sorry I didn't mention it before, but I just thought I'd describe this in sort of a subjective way. Having done some mountaineering, and I know many of you have gone up hiking up a mountain, and you've got your focus on the way up, and you may be halfway, and you see the halfway mark. But then there's times where you turn around and look down and realize just how far you've come. And when you read through the number of check marks that are here, some that were checked off in the first year and the second year, and then there's the third year. It really is a sense that a lot of ground has covered, and it's long. We've come a long way. So thank you. Just sort of reiterating kind of what the mayor said.
Thanks, Councillor Van Holst. And other speakers? Let's call the question. We're voting. Oh, moved by Councillor Hopkins, seconded by Councillor Helmer. Now we're voting.
Motion carries 13-0.
Okay, we have item 5. This is a public submission. It's from the London and Middlesex Housing Corporation. It's with specific requests about board member service term and a request for extension. Councillor Hopkins, did you want to set this up?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm hoping the committee will support the request to consider passing the necessary bylaw to stagger the terms of the current board. We have met with staff, and I want to thank staff too for the work that they've done with the board members. It was important to the board that we get this right. We have 5 expirations coming up out of 9 members. That's not counting the 2 elected officials that will or may not be on the board next year. And it is important, given that London Middlesex Housing is going through a really significant time at the moment with the new strategic plan, but we're also redefining who we are as a corporation, and it will be important to have that continuation of some board members to keep the momentum, let's say, going forward. So I'll leave it with the committee, and hopefully you'll support the request.
Deputy Mayor Hubert, other speakers?
Yeah, I absolutely support the request, but I also want to raise the flag that with many of our boards and commissions, this sort of ending in all of the members being up for re-election at the end of the council term creates significant consternation for them. It's really not a good way of dealing with succession planning. And so I don't know what the solution. I wish I had a solution for that. I know it's an issue on the convention center, and we're looking at that from a business continuity perspective. And maybe it's something that the clerk could take a look at and maybe canvass some of the boards and directors. Obviously, the new council has an opportunity to put people back on, but also that leaves sometimes a sense of disingenuousness that there's really 6 slots open, but really the board's only really looking for 2 because they need that continuity. And I just wanted to raise that. I fully support what London Middlesex Housing's doing. I think it's very prudent, but it does leave some of our organizations vulnerable from a succession planning point of view.
Councillor Park.
Thank you very much. Just a very quick question. With the recommendation coming forward, I noticed that there's 3 people that'll be rolling off the board at the end of this very month. When will we be appointing new individuals or reappointing individuals?
The provisions within the governing legislation are such that they would continue to hold office until their replacements are appointed, so there is continuity there.
Other speakers? Let's have that motion opened up on screen, please. That's moved by Councillor Armstrong and seconded by Councillor Van Holst. There are no additional speakers, so I'll call the question. Voting.
Motion carries 13-0.
Okay, let's move on through the agenda. We'll move on to the added. I'll look to Councillor Ridley. Did you want to move the 6th report of the governance working group? Great, thank you.
Yeah, we did.
Any discussion on item 6? Moved by Councillor Ridley, seconded by Councillor Armstrong. Let's call the question.
Motion carries 13-0.
And we have an added submission as the Hyde Park Business Improvement Area Board of Director appointments. A very good news story. Councillor Morgan, would you like to move this?
Well, I could, but my name's on the list, so maybe someone else should. I'd be happy to speak to it when it's appropriate.
Why don't you speak to it now, and Councillor Helmer's going to move it.
Well, the association held its AGM, which is required under our bylaws, on November 16th, where they put forward both a suggested slate for a Board of Management, which was unanimously approved, as well as a $306,000 budget, which will flow to council for approval later on. I know our staff has some work to do with just hammering out the exact way that the levy will work across all of the different businesses. But it was a good meeting, and it was fairly well attended by local businesses and very good. And as colleagues probably are wondering why this is here, we don't create board BIAs very often, but for those who recall the bylaw, it is council's responsibility to actually appoint the Board of Management. The Board of Management parallels with the term of municipal council, and so the people who are appointed to this particular Board of Management will be that board until the end of next year, when the new council would appoint a new Board of Management. And also we approve the annual budgets, and those come at a regular time of year. So I'd be happy to answer any questions because I attended the meeting, but I'm certainly not on the BIA yet, but I certainly was present.
Okay. That's been moved by Councillor Helmer and seconded by Councillor Van Holst. I have Councillor Park on the speakers list. Anyone else?
Thank you. I just wanted to ask about the process here. When we appoint individuals to other BIAs, it comes through council first, the application. So this just seems like a disjointed process, recognizing that we just created this BIA through the term. I just wonder if we could talk about the process a little more and how it'll work going forward.
In actuality, for BIAs, the BIAs themselves bring forward the names to council for approval in all instances. So you will find that this is the normal process that is followed. The only thing that's unique about this one is that because they are being formed late in the council term, the term is somewhat shorter than usual. One of the board of or one of the BIAs I know beginning of this last term had to submit a little bit later. We didn't confirm them until a little bit into the process because they hadn't had their meeting yet to give us the names. So they do generate the names themselves.
Great, thanks very much. I guess my memory is just a little fuzzy after going through the striking committee and everything way back when. So I am very supportive of the individuals that have put their name forward. Just glad to know a little more about the process.
Deputy Mayor Hubert.
Yes, I was at the AGM, and I think one of the things that's really interesting about this group is it really is a culmination of really a couple decades of work, but it really got energized, and we can thank our engineering department and the roads department through construction process, and one that wasn't so good back in 2005, and one that was handled really well, which was the Hyde Park Road widening of a couple of years ago, and the then councillor for Ward 7, Matt Brown, was very successful in getting that shortened to a 2-year process from a 3-year process. We had to twist a couple engineers' arms, but that was really very, very helpful. And I actually think this is really going to be quite a vibrant BIA. And when you look at the individuals that are signing up here, it's really a good mix of old and new, established businesses and newer businesses. And I know most of them on here, and I think it's terrific. They did have I was actually surprised at the turnout for their inaugural AGM, and so the area is quite vibrant. I think it's a good model. I want to send a shout out to our other BIAs as well that have been helpful in the process, and they're working together collaboratively, and I think that's a positive thing, not just for this area, but I know Councillor Van Holst is, on his Christmas wish list is a BIA for Hamilton Road, and there may be others, Lambeth or wherever. So I think that's a very positive thing to continue to see that growth from a small business perspective. So very positive. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Hubert. Any other speakers? Councillor Armstrong.
Yes, I want to congratulate Hyde Park's new BIA and wish them the best. And of course, I'm on the board of the Argyle BIA, and I know the staff there have been working with the staff of the Hyde Park and giving them some guidance, and so I wanted to recognize the staff there for doing that. The other thing, with BIAs, I think it's really important that we're moving towards BIAs that business is supporting business, business is paying for business, that these BIAs are not, once they get their initial startup, or we'll call it seed money, that they move towards self-funding, that the taxpayers aren't paying for it, and that's the model that Argyle has, and certainly, and I'm not 100% sure of the model. I'm assuming Hyde Park is working on that type of model, but business should pay for business because generally they directly benefit from. So I hope this one and others look at that model rather than the city funding. We should be moving away from that. So, thank you.
And Councillor Morgan.
Yes, just one, I want to make two other comments based on what my colleagues have said. One was I appreciate and thank Deputy Mayor Hubert for thanking all of the staff involved. I think Mr. Logan is also an individual who did an enormous amount of work in pulling together a lot of the financial aspects of what the BIA would look like and the costs per business. On the budget, Councillor Armstrong mentioned, yes, Municipal Council did provide some startup money as it has with other BIAs in the past. If you recall, through Planning Committee and Council, we gave them what we called some gap funding for a couple of months. The budget, when it comes to this particular council, which you will see, does include a repayment to Municipal Council of that. And so I know that was something that could not be compelled or promised in advance, but the BIA did discuss it and did put that repayment over 2 years of the money that was given to council to on behalf of the taxpayers. That's going to be paid back by the BIA. They appreciated that. It was really about filling a gap between the end of the startup money and the start of when the levy will flow to them. So I wanted colleagues to know that as well.
Other speakers? Okay, I think there's a synonymous great work, everyone, and years in the making, but really, really impressive to see this move forward. And thank you, Deputy Mayor Hubert, for reminding me of Hyde Park Road. That really was, I think the whole community was concerned, all of the businesses were concerned of the business interruption that they'd experienced during that very important project. It was a parking lot, and that was a problem for them as well. But it was staff that came together, and many late nights and weekends meeting with the community, meeting with yourself and me to make that project happen over a 2-year time frame. And I think it was a pretty ambitious time frame as well. And remarkably, most of the engineers that were working on that project are now retired. And I don't know if there's a connection to that project or not, but it was a great fond memory. As we move forward through this has been moved by Councillor Helmer, seconded by Councillor Van Holst. Any additional speakers? Okay, we'll call the question. Voting.
Motion carries 13-0.
And we have an added council member submission. It is an indication of a wish to resign from the London Police Service Board by Councillor Turner. So in a moment, we'll open up this for a vote so we can defeat it, but I wanted to turn things over to Councillor Turner first.
Thank you, Your Worship. I tendered notice to the London Police Services Board at its meeting last week that I intended to resign effective the conclusion of the meeting on December 14th. Ultimately, I've had some challenges with the time of that meeting. It basically runs from 10 till 3, which is kind of the heart of a workday. Difficult to balance, and I either have to draw on vacation time or find alternate time in order to make up that time. We played with the meeting schedule a little bit to try and accommodate that, but it wasn't helpful to the other members of the committee as well. So reluctantly, I've withdrawn from the board, but I did want to open up the opportunity as well. At this point, I saw a reasonable point to give the opportunity to my colleagues to sit for the remainder of the term up until the end of the next year. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Turner. I have Councillor Cassidy and Hopkins.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to take a minute to thank Councillor Turner for his service on the board. I believe he represented this council very well, and I think his voice will be missed. And it's unfortunate that this schedule couldn't accommodate Councillor Turner's schedule, but thank you very much through the chair.
Thank you, Councillor Hopkins.
I too want to thank Councillor Turner. Oh, your voice was so important to me while being on that board. I know we have other representation, but I know the passion that you have for the board, and your voice will be missed. So thank you.
Other speakers? I think, Councillor, you can tell just by the reaction from all your colleagues, I'll add my voice to it as well, that your contributions to the London Police Service Board over the past 3 years have been really important. And we've been through some very challenging policy discussions. We've been through some issues that affect the most vulnerable members of our community. And you've been a strong voice through all of that. And specifically your attention to policy in detail as you worked your way through every single agenda package. This is a board that meets for almost an entire day. And the prep work that's required leading up to that almost entire day meeting is about equivalent. And you always came prepared, and you always spoke with, I think, with authority, but also with compassion for our community and with respect for our London Police Service members as well. And so I think it's very unanimous that we're sorry to see you go. We think you did an incredible job, and we thank you for your time in the London Police Service Board. And so I will reluctantly call for this motion to be up on screen. I'll look for a mover and a seconder. It's been moved by Councillor Helmer and seconded by Councillor Morgan. Any additional speakers? Deputy Mayor Hubert.
Simply one, to say, you know, I think it highlights a perspective on the work of council. And for a valued member to have to step away from that because of work commitments, and it raises that flag and that point for reflection for those that have employment outside of 300 Dufferin Street, and the challenges that is. It requires of employers some real understanding. And yet, as an employer, they also bear the weight of equitable treatment of all employees. So I think that's a comment to the community as well. And I share my colleagues' appreciation for the work that Councillor Turner does on the Police Services Board, or has done on the Police Services Board, but it's also a reflection of how much work is required of members of council on all boards and commissions.
Thank you. Councillor Van Holst.
Thanks. Just another word. We were a new council, and it was important for us to hit the ground running in many areas. So I think it was great to have Councillor Turner on the board, because he has a great deal of experience that was relevant to it. And that was one of the reasons I supported him. So thanks again for bringing that to council.
Okay, I have no additional speakers. Let's call the question.
Motion carries 13-0.
Thanks, colleagues. Let's circle back then. We, Councillor Turner's request, had a recess for the public participation meeting on the budget update. And so let's have a motion come up on screen to reopen that public participation meeting if, well, I mean, we have to open it up to close it, so let's open it up. And I'll go to Councillor Salee. And again, I'll invite any of our guests here at Council Chambers. If you'd like to speak, just give me a wave and we'll find some time in the microphone.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just had a question. Do we not have to put a replacement for Councillor Turner? No, I'm saying, is this when we're doing that, or I wasn't sure about that.
So it was up and down quickly, but it was part of the motion that at the next SPPC meeting, we'll be doing the selection process, and the clerk's office would very much appreciate members, anyone interested in serving, to connect with them. I'm sure that, Ms. Rowe, you'll send an email out just reminding us to do that, and we'll select that member at the next meeting to be in place for January, so there's a seamless transition. Councillor Turner's last board meeting will be December. Okay, so if we can just get that motion up on screen, moved by Councillor Armstrong, seconded by Deputy Mayor Hubert. I'll just ask if there are any members of the public interested in speaking to the committee at this time.
Can we call the question to reconvene?
And first we're going to vote. Voting.
Councillor Squire?
That'll be my only quote that you'll use, right?
Motion carries 13-0.
Lead story, news.
Okay. At budget meeting. Okay. Let's, there are no additional speakers here, members of the public, and so we'll look then for a motion to close the PPM. Moved by Councillor Park, seconded by Councillor Turner. Any discussion? Okay, let's call the question. Voting.
Motion carries 13-0.
Colleagues, just as, unless you're, I don't imagine there's any discussion on this item. We've need to pass a motion, I think, also to accept the public submissions, unless we've done that previously. So that'll come up on screen. And just while we're waiting for that, I just want to highlight this process, and that, you know, we're several years into the multi-year budget process, and I can tell you, as a person who was a member of council from 2010 to 2014, and what that budget process was like, what these public participation meetings were like, vastly different than what we see today. I know that staff do everything they can to connect with the public, and it's not just here in council chambers. There's lots of ways to connect using low-tech and high-tech opportunities. But the events were pretty loud, and discussions were pretty vigorous when we were doing those single-year budgets back during that term. And I think this is another example of a process that's working relatively well, working very well, I should say. And I want to thank staff for the work on that as well. Motion should be up in a moment. Moved by Councillor Turner, seconded by Councillor Park. Any discussion? Let's call the question.
Motion carries 13-0.
It is 5 after 5, and we're at the end of our agenda. And so I'll look for a motion to adjourn. Councillor Armstrong, seconded by Deputy Mayor Hubert. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? Thanks, everybody. Have a great night.